There's a book I'm reading right now by G.H. Hardy titled A Mathematician's Apology. It's about it's a book by a mathematician, G.H. Hardy. He was a British mathematician and pioneer in number theory. He starts off by lamenting about how he, as a professional mathematician, should not be writing a book about mathematicians or what mathematicians have done, but a professional mathematician should be doing something and contributing to mathematics by advancing new theorems. G.H. Hardy, of course, wrote this book in his 60s. He'd suffered a heart attack and he realized that he didn't have the capacity to do serious mathematics anymore. And he's not the first to have observed this. I once read a book, A Beautiful Mind. There's the movie on A Beautiful Mind. It was about John Nash. John Nash was a Nobel laureate in economics. He was actually a mathematician as well. And of course, he won a Nobel Prize for his advances in game theory. And that book was saying that mathematics is actually it's a young man's discipline, right? And this is sort of what G.H. Hardy was lamenting about, that his capacity to do math had diminished significantly with age, and so he actually mentions that his chief um, accomplishment, right, were not advances in number theory or any other advances that he made, but in the discovery of an Indian mathematician, a genius, Srinivasan Ramanujan, who unfortunately died at the age of 32 years old. A reason why I'm discussing mathematics and I'm reading this book by G.H. Hardy. It's a quick, it's a very short book. It's really like a long essay published as a book, so I have the book. Is because I've read numerous articles since yesterday about how um, America has a math problem. Americans have a math problem, especially with the rise of AI, right? Artificial intelligence. And so I was going through several articles that, provide data on how majority of students enrolled in intensive math programs, which, are foundational to AI. AI is the rave now in America, are actually foreign born. Um, this article was saying that only 20% of students in enrolled in intensive, the sort of intensive math programs and technology programs that that lead to AI jobs are American born. A study says that in Northeastern's graduate engineering program, 80% of the students are Indians. I was actually a STEM major at Columbia University, and I observed this. Majority of the students in math, in the math courses I took in physics and whatnot, um, were minorities, were Asian majority, right? Um, this is not to continue to perpetrate any sort of stereotype, but considering the ICE raids, right, the anti-immigration, anti-F1, the F1 visa bans, the reality that America does not create an environment that engenders homegrown mathematicians and STEM students, right? Of course, we should allow people to flourish in their interests, but at the same time, um, I read an article that was saying that, well, that minorities should be encouraged to go into STEM, into mathematics, right? To do many people flee from math because it is rigorous, it's very hard, it's not easy, right? And this was something I noticed when I first came to America, that American born students want to do the easy courses, the easy subjects, right? Even going to when they want to go to medical school, a rigorous challenging program like medical school, the counselors, right, advise students to major in an easy subject so they can get a high GPA in the humanities, to do gender studies, to do history, and then they just take the pre-med courses, just a few, just the required pre-med courses, so they can artificially inflate their scores. When I was a pre-med, I decided I was going to do engineering entirely. I, of course, had a degree in history before I came to America. And I didn't do any math at all. I didn't do any mathematics. I wasn't interested because I knew what I wanted to do. I wanted to study law. I wanted to be a lawyer. But when I came to America, my professor advised me that, look, you have to think about employability, right? You have to think about being employed. So something I never thought of in my life. He advised me to do accounting. I told him I didn't do any math, so I had to do statistics. I did statistics, I did accounting. Now, in this school I went to, um, we used calculators. We learned how to master calculators, master Excel, right? So that was helpful, right? But when I decided to become a pre-med student later on, and I went to Columbia University, I actually became an engineering major. I was an engineering major, so that's why I have history and mathematics, right? Because I just took all these math courses. In fact, my professors advised me to switch and be a math major and do the pre-med separately because they were impressed to see, I was, I didn't realize it. I was the only black student in my math courses at Columbia University. And of course, it was filled with Asians. Well, there were other people, but as whites or Jews, I mean, I don't know. There were Jewish people, lots of Asians, and my professors tried to get me to major in math. The chair of the biological sciences, because at one point I switched to biological sciences, she tried to convince me, and she told me about how she was actually a math major, because she was a professor of biology, one of the preeminent people in biology. I'm not going to mention her name. I don't even know if she's still alive. Um, Professor Tish Matuszek, I've said her name. And she told me how she was actually a math major and she picked up biology later on and in grad school. And she was like, they're like, people don't, um, people don't do math the way I was doing it. And I was like, look, I didn't think I was natural one. I thought I worked too hard at it, right? The good thing about mathematics is it requires concentration, not like reading. Like reading, you can stray, you can become absent-minded, because there's a lot of frills, fluff in writing, just things that are depending on the skill of the writer. It could be, the words that are unnecessary, and so it can be distracting sometimes, but not mathematics. It requires concentration. So I remember I told her that, look, I told them that I worked too hard, and I didn't think it came naturally to me, and so I just worked too hard, and they told me everybody works hard. Everybody who does math works extremely hard. The only thing is that some people start early. I didn't start early like the people that I think it comes naturally to them, that they just started early and they've been doing it very, very early, And it's kind of interesting that and I was reading, the biography of someone who became a great mathematician. And of course, you come across his theorems in where you do mathematics. George Boole, right? Boolean algebra. George Boole was an autodidact. He was self-taught. He became a professor of mathematics at Queen's College. He didn't go to school, right? He was poor, but he became a great, phenomenal mathematician, George Boole. It's interesting, we actually have a president who became a mathematician. He actually posited a theorem, right? He expanded on the theorem. I think it was on Pythagorean theorem. That's our 20th president. Second president to be assassinated. James Garfield. He was a mathematician. He was a lawyer. He was many things. He's our only president who was a pastor as well, who was a pastor. And, and as I was reading these things, I admired a certain 19th and early 20th century Brits. They were autodidacts. They wanted to improve themselves, like Charles Dickens. This is going over to reading, because I was saying that when you're doing math, you can't get distracted, right? It requires all your attention. But reading, you can get distracted depending on the skill of the author. But I'm like, not Charles Dickens. As I was thinking of that, not Charles Dickens. And it's interesting that Charles Dickens didn't finish high school, didn't go to college, because he was, his father was poor, and but he started working early, became a law clerk in a law office, became a journalist, a reporter, and became a voracious reader, and his writing was exceptional. Apart from not being able to do math, right, that most of our, enrolled students in mathematics in STEM are actually foreign born. Majority of them. Americans also have a problem with reading and writing. And I was thinking that, because I have a manuscript that I've been trying to sell, and I'm trying to write a book, of course, regarding my experiences. But I've been looking for someone who would give me an advance. In the 90s, it was common. It wasn't unusual. Let me not say common. It wasn't unusual for unknown authors to be advanced multi-million-dollar packages, right? Not anymore. But I was even wondering, to be fair, who reads books these days, right? Who reads? Because there's studies. I read another study at one time that 40% of Americans do not read a single book in an entire year. 40% of Americans. And then I decided to start checking book sales. And I'm like, okay, all these authors, all these people who write books, publish books, and they live it large. They live it up like they're millionaires from writing books. When Americans don't read books, right? And I'm like, who buys books? And so I went to read the stats on book sales, and it says 96% of books, 96% of book sales, right, sell less than 1,000 copies. In America, 96%. I'm like, what? It's 1,000 copies. And it turns out that there's a small portion of super readers in America, very tiny segment of Americans who are super readers, and they're responsible for the majority of the book sales. And it turns out that when authors publish, right, in order to send books into bestsellers, big corporations buy books in bulk, right? By thousands of copies. So big corporations, they just buy thousands of copies in order to artificially inflate book sales to send them to the bestseller list. And especially for non-fiction, for celebrities and maybe politicians, So it's kind of interesting, that Americans are not reading. They're not enrolling in math classes. And we're supposed to be the number one nation, right? Obviously, this escalating illiteracy, right? Because that's what it is. It's going to have an impact on um, our ability to be the leading nation, right? The reason why we have the strongest military in the world is not because our men lift weights and take steroids or and do a lot of sports and they're huge, eat a lot of beef and no, it's because of our technology, right? We had advanced technology. We were the first to develop a nuclear program, and it required brains, right? A lot of European scientists fled here, and we had that um, space age, space, uh, space program race, with the USSR. So we've always required a talented, highly educated STEM pool, right, in order to be the leading nation militarily and technologically. So if we're not replenishing the pipeline, because we relied on a foreign pipeline, but now we are barring even F1. We're banning even F1 students, right? And of course, we're not able to grow our STEM students organically, indigenously. We're not able to grow them. It's going to have a blowback, right? Technologically, um, already studies say that uh, Russia Russia enrolls four times as many STEM students, right? Graduates four times as many STEM students as America. China, eight times more. So they're about to surpass us anytime, right? Russia, China. China's already surpassed America, right? China now has more, for the first time, China graduated more STEM PhDs than in America, right? It's now surpassed America in STEM PhDs. So, I was thinking of a time when, because there's a talk of sometimes you hear people saying, well, they're not going to go to school, go to college and enroll in STEM. Because, well, STEM programs are very expensive, right? They're very expensive. But people don't want to go to college because of the costs. What about people who are able to be self-taught? Because there was, again, I just talked about George Poole, right? George Poole was self-taught. He ended up becoming a professor of mathematics. He didn't go to college. He hardly had education. He just taught himself. Same thing with Charles Dickens, right? Lots of people that are self-taught. You can just learn. But the thing is, Americans don't have an interest in education. They don't have an interest in reading. They don't have an interest in doing hard math courses. What is it that Americans, young people are doing? Youth, what are they doing? Right? It's interesting that the book I'm reading about G.H. Hardy, who pioneered number theory. Number theory was seminal in the develop. It's been, it lays a foundation for theorems that go on to help artificial intelligence, right? So I just thought that I share this thought. So an alternative is getting minorities interested in doing the hard things, right? The hard things. Minorities doing the hard things, just like they get foreign students, international students, to do the hard things as well. Like I said, I never didn't have any interest in accounting, but my professor told me that if I studied accounting, I'll always have a job, and he was right. Right? I had a job right after school. While I was in school, I was hired as a bookkeeper. Right? A bookkeeper in a small business, which helped me pay for school right away. And I was a full-time student, always a full-time student. right after, I got a job at the bank once I graduated, right? So people who come from, you know, less, indigent families, because high school, by the way, high school is free in America. Elementary, all of those, the public schools, they're free. So the idea is to get kids interested in reading and doing math STEM very early, right? In any event, I'm going to stop this video here, and I will discuss the book once I'm done. That's G.H. Hardy's A Mathematician's Apology. My name is Olurotimi Osha, and I'll keep you posted. Thank you.